자, 오늘도 이렇게 와주셔서 감사합니다. 지금 날씨가 아주 더운데 지금 여름 나기가 참 어렵죠. 지금 또 여러분들 일하시는 분도 계시고 뭐 이래서 일하고 또 오시는 것도 쉽지 않을 텐데 일단 이런 높은 학구열을 보여주셔서 감사하고요. 자, 오늘은 특별히 아시는 분도 계시고 또 뭐 처음 뵙는 분도 계실 텐데, 자, 오늘 그 특별히 정말 한국에 대한 애정과 관심을 정말 많이 갖고 있는 저희 교수님이세요. 우리 데이빗 메이슨 교수님은 한국에 오신 지가 아까 최종적으로 확인해 보니까 36년 되셨어요. 지금 현재 여름휴가 방학이라서 지금 필리핀에 가 계시고요. 지금 저희 이 일정 마치시느라고 특별히 시간을 내주셨습니다. 지금 데이빗 교수님은 원래 그 책을 여러 권 쓰셨는데 그 중에서도 이제 인상 깊은 게 산신이라고 해서 샤머니즘에 대한 관심이 굉장히 많으세요. 그래서 아마 전국에 있는 굿당을 제일 많이 다니셨을 거요, 교수님. David, I think you are the most one who visited the 굿당, the shamanist ritual place, I think, right?
Well, among foreigners, I'm one of the most, maybe.
예. 그리고 최근에 나온 책 중에는 이제 고운 채치원에 대한 내용을 쓰신 게 있고요. 그리고 또 제가 가지고 있는 중에는 그 불교 사전, 한영 불교 사전, 그 막대한 불교 사전을 또 집필도 하셨습니다. 뭐 일단 그 또 활동하고 계신 거는 백두대간이라고 해서 그 한국의 산에 대해서도 또 많은 애정을 가지고 계세요. 그래서 백두대간이라는 이 산에 뭐 이런 여러 가지 또 활동도 하고 계시고 있습니다. 자, 오늘 2시간 동안 진행을 할 거고요. 아까 말씀드린 대로 50분 수업하고 10분 쉬고 그리고 다시 50분 이렇게 진행을 하겠습니다. 질문은 채팅창에 모두 남겨놔 주시면 되고요. So the 교수님, David, we're gonna do the 15 minutes lecture and 10 minutes break and another 15 minutes, and all the question Q&A will be given after the class. So we're going to put or write down all the question on the chatting or messenger, or they can give directly ask you after the class. So it'll be the Q&A or discussion after the class. Okay. So
all right. It's okay with me.
So now, please introduce yourself and start. Let's go. Let's start.
All right. People, hello. Very, very nice to see you, meet you, and I'm glad you could show up to watch this. Glad you're interested. I'm just one of the foreigners involved with Korea for a very long time, and want to show you something about what I've done in Korea, and how kind of the process by which I ended up as a professor of cultural tourism, teaching young Koreans how to be a tour guide and how to interpret Korea well to the outside world. And being myself a VIP tour guide, I guide government officials and wealthy people, business people and such all over Korea, particularly in Seoul and Gyeongju, I guess. And I'll show you something about that. It's not only about shamanism. I have been a student of all Korea's religions and heritage, including the Buddhism and the Neo-Confucianism and even Korean Christianity, as well as shamanism, just all the religious stuff. And in particular, the Korean mountains have been my focus and the spiritual culture that's in the mountains. Now, I hope now you're seeing my slide of PowerPoint, and here you see the basic facts of my record, what I've done, the basic points. I've been tour guiding in Korea for 20 years until the coronavirus hit. This is what I look like in my professor's office, although this photo is more than 10 years old. I look older than that now. All right. And I would like to mention I'm part of a community of other foreigners who are very interested in Korea, belonging to the Royal Asiatic Society. And one of our members just died in May 11th. And that was very sad. Peter Bartholomew, he was a good friend of mine. And we were connected. We came from the same hometown, in fact. We went to the same high school, which is an amazing coincidence. And we both ended up in Korea, though him like 10 years before me. And while he was here, Peter Bartholomew became one of the top experts on Korean Hanok and taught me a lot. He was such an expert on Hanok that the Korean government consulted with him when they're reconstructing Gyeongbokgung recently, and also the Unhyunggung over in Myeongdong and such. They consulted with him of the proper way to do it. He was such an expert. Out of all foreigners, clearly the number one expert on Korean Hanok. And, you know, I studied other things, not Hanok, but I learned a lot from Peter, and I just want you to know about him. Write down this name and look up some of the articles about him, the kind of life that he had in Korea. It's really much more dramatic than mine, my case. But he was a great man and a great friend of Korea. This is me, believe it or not, in 1987, okay? 1987, actually in the winter, and this is what I looked like way back then. I wore a beard so that Koreans wouldn't think I was US Army, because back then, 1987, still, almost all the Americans in Korea were US Army or else embassy or CIA people. There was hardly any tourists or interested scholars, very, very few. So I wore a beard, and this, of course, you know where this is. Probably most of you know this is one of Korea's great national treasures, and this is where really I got interested in this, the person who wrote this monument, Go-un Chechiwan, looking at this monument, having a monk explain to me, and then having my girlfriend translate it. I got interested in this person, Chechiwan, and much, much later, 30 years later, I wrote a book about Chechiwan, the first book in English. This is where I first became interested looking at this. And so these are the years I've been in Korea. It stopped in 2019 because of coronavirus, but I expect by 2022 I'll be back. I do hope. I first arrived in summer '82, and it's just some first impressions. I think many of you don't know this, but Korea was very unknown. Like I said, there was no tourists, very few visitors who were not military or security people from the outside. Only Japanese tourists came to Korea to spend money. Maybe a very few from Taiwan, and that was about it. And nobody knew anything about Korea. In English language guidebooks that I had, the guidebook from Australia, the Lonely Planet Company, back then put Korea as the back part of its Japan book. I know this is something that will make you angry to hear about, but in 1982, this was true. They had a guidebook to Japan, and in the back part of the book was South Korea with that. And the European guidebook was of China. They had a guidebook of China with Taiwan and Hong Kong, and they also put Korea in part of the back part of the book, as if like Korea is kind of a part of China, and the Lonely Planet book kind of pretending Korea is a part of Japan. It really was like that, at least in the English language back then. And it's not that these people, like in Australia, that they're against Korea. They didn't have any negativity to Korea. They just didn't know, just kind of ignorant. And the things they said about Korea in their guidebook, nobody knew. And this is the first thing that I saw when I came in from the airport. It was Gimpo Airport in those days, was the international airport. And I came in on the airport bus, and there was nothing Korean. It was just modern city all along the highway by the Han River. But then when we entered downtown Seoul, this is the first Korean thing that I saw. And immediately I kind of had the idea, I said, wow, well, that's not Chinese and that's not Japanese. It's different. I had already been to both Chinese areas like Taiwan and also Japan. And I knew what their gates looked like. And I was thinking, nah, wait a minute. And then when I got downtown to Gwanghwamun and saw the Gwanghwamun gate, looked around, saw a few things in my first few days, and smelling like the food and tasting the food in the alleyways, like Pimat Gol kind of areas and such. I was staying in a Yeoinsuk back in those days, a Yeoinsuk for $2 per night, if you can imagine that. About each and one per night for a bed to sleep. And my big first impression was, wait a minute, this is a third country. This is a third culture. This is not China. It's not Japan. It's something in between, and it's distinct. It's different. It has its own character. It's a third country. And I got interested in this. I got interested in like, how is this that nobody knows anything about this country, even though we were fighting, we still have military here, the Korean War, all this stuff, but nobody knows anything about the history and culture and the character of this place. Why is this? And I went to the Kyobo building at Gwanghwamun. Back then it was a very new building, that brown copper colored big building, Kyobo building. And in the bookstore, they had, in the basement, they'd opened up this big bookstore. There's still maybe the biggest bookstore in Korea. And I went in there to look for English language books about Korean history and culture. And there was like 65 books, if you can believe it, 65 books in English about Korean history and culture and politics also. And that was it, 65 books. I mean, today there's 100 times more than that, 1,000 times more maybe. And I wrote 10 of those books. But back then, just 65 books. And as a young scholar type traveler person, I really got interested. I got interested in that. What is this mystery country? This country that nobody has researched very much. Nobody knows about what's going on here and why. Why is it so mysterious? I mean, in Japan, people had already written 1,000 books about Japan in English. And China, of course, we've been studying China for 400 years in the Western world. We already knew everything about China, but what was this place? Now, one thing in particular, I did get interested in the shamanism pretty early, just because previously I'd lived in California for about 4 years, finishing my university. And I got into some, Native American shamanism, got very interested in that. and that whole perspective on the world. And I was aware of a global shamanism, and I was quite surprised that Korea had a shamanism going pretty strongly. And I was an English teacher back then. That's how I was paying for myself to visit the original Jongro Iga Hagwons. You know, they were just starting back then at Jongro Iga. Gangnam-gu did not exist back then. Gangnam was just under construction. Such with the Jongro Iga Hagwons, like Pagoda Hagwon, they just started back then. I was working for them, very few teachers, and it was very strange. When you got a job in a Hagwon there, the first thing they told you is you don't talk about democracy. You don't talk about liberty or freedom. You don't say those words. Those words are not part of the English lesson. Just shut up about any of that. This was the lockdown period of Chundewan, if you know anything about this, or some of you would remember under Chundewan. Things were pretty grim, pretty heck down, and I could not speak about democracy in my class, but I did ask my students in adult English class, I asked about shamanism. Really, can I see some Korean shamanism? Where can I go? And they told me it doesn't exist. Seriously, all my students in the class, oh, we don't do that anymore. Oh no, we're modern people, we're educated people. Oh, my grandmother did that. Old Halmini back in the village, she did that before, but nobody does that anymore. That's gone in Korea. So it became interesting because I love mountain hiking, and I would go hiking like at Bukhansan or Gwanaksan, and then further outside of Seoul, I would go hiking in the mountains, and I would find shamanism. There were shaman shrines, and there were shamans practicing back there, and I'd come across them, and I thought they don't do that anymore. I thought it's gone. And I took like a lot of photos, very enthusiastic to take photos, because I was thinking, oh, this must be the last one. This is like the last shamans in Korea. Maybe I found the last shaman shrine because it's disappearing. And so I should take photos of this. This is a valuable opportunity to see this, because it's disappearing, it's dying. And then it goes on, for a decade and another decade and into the 1990s. And I find more and more shamanism, and very actively, and then finding brand new shaman shrines, newly constructed ones that cost a lot of money. And I start thinking, wait a minute, wait, this isn't dying. And I kept on taking pictures. Korea, I discovered very quickly, has any Korean religion and spirituality, except maybe the urban Christianity, there is a nature-focused influence from both shamanism and Taoism. I think you might know Taoism or Dogyo from China. Chinese Taoism had a big influence on Korea, although it was never formally established in Korea. And this is something to tell your tour groups and make clear. Taoism was never really an official religion of Korea. Buddhism, yes, different kinds of Buddhism, surely, and then Neo-Confucianism, surely, very much, and finally Christianity. But Taoism never was, but Taoism influenced Korean art and Korean religion, spirituality, very, very much, all of them. Now, this is a slogan I often use, and something that delighted me. Korean Buddhism is the most Taoist kind of Buddhism in the world. The influence of Korean Buddhism is from Chinese Taoism is so very strong, and that's delightful, and it's wonderful, this nature thing. Now, I suppose you probably know, because you're tour guides and you're students of culture, Buddhism is largely psychological. It's a psychological school of rearranging your mind and your thinking to become a Buddha. But It doesn't have much to do really with health, with human health, or with nature, loving nature, integrating, being part of nature, all these things. And Taoism covers that. Chinese Taoism is very big on health and yoga and nature focus. And because Taoism was not an enemy religion in Korea, was not a rival religion, so Korean Buddhism took a lot of Taoism into it, a lot of the Taoist flavor. In China, these two religions are enemies. They're enemies. They don't like each other. They are very separate, very distinct, different. You must be a Buddhist or a Taoist. You have to choose. Can't be both. But in Korea, Korean Buddhism, like this, as this artwork show, this is a Buddhist master, but very much like a Sanchin mountain spirit with a tiger in a total Taoist landscape and the Buddhist temple way up there. Korean Buddhism is the most Taoist kind in the world. And that was delightful. I didn't like it in China that I had to choose, that these were separate, different, and enemies. I like Taoism and I like Buddhism, and found them mixed together, wonderfully blended in Korea. So tell your tour clients that. Such. And also, of course, Korean Neo-Confucianism, the Seongnihak from the 14th century onward, also very Taoist in flavor, becoming very Taoist in flavor. You see it at the Soan in the countryside mountains, a place like Dosan Soan. You see the Taoist flavor very much in the teachings of people like Taege and Yulguk and such. It's blended in and very wonderful. This also has to do with Goun Chechiwan, the guy I especially studied. So, Now, part of this is that Korea has the most mountain-based kind of temples in the world of any Buddhist tradition. All the greatest temples of Korea are in the mountains. This is unique. In any other Buddhist country, whether you're talking about Tokyo or Bangkok or ancient India or Vietnam, the greatest temples are in the city. They were usually right near the king's palace. Right next to the king's palace was the greatest temples of the nation. But Korea is the only country that, because of the Neo-Confucianism in the 14th century, by the time of Taejong, about 1398, Buddhism was made illegal. Buddhism was kicked out of the cities, driven out of the cities, and the only place they could survive is in the deepest mountains. So the Buddhists go there, and there are no great temples remaining in any city. There have been only modern ones, reconstructed or simply modern, like Jogesa in Seoul or Samgwangsa in Busan. Now, in Korea, you got this. You got giant temples, the main temples, the greatest temples in the mountains, and it's so beautiful, such lovely landscape. And the first time, it was during a tour of the Royal Asiatic Society, which I mentioned before. Peter Bartholomew, one of the leaders 10 years older than me, and I was just a brand new member, and they took a bus tour, and we went to Sognisan and Bubjusa. This is the first main or large important Buddhist temple I ever visited in Korea. I visited many others in other countries because they're in the big city. It's easy to visit, right? But here, I come here and it's amazing. It's astounding. The great treasures, the great scenery, the lovely atmosphere in the mountains and such. And this is where I really fell hard for Korean culture and thinking, my God, the whole world doesn't even know about this. This is all just top secret. See, I want you to understand, I studied Buddhism in the university. I studied global Buddhism as part of my university courses, and we never heard about Korea. We never saw any picture like this. Never saw anything from Korea. My professors, I'm pretty sure, never mentioned Korea. We learned about Japan, China, Vietnam, Thailand, Burma, India. So I didn't know. It just, again, nobody knew anything about Korea. It was unknown to the world. It's something like this. And inside this temple, what I found out here in the main compound in those days, I think I remember this building at that time was serving as this kind of a Samsung-gak of a very early variation, or a Sanshin-gak at that time, or maybe it was this, can't remember. But I found this the first time I saw a Korean Sanshin painting, which immediately made me curious, made me interested, made me say, hey, okay, what's going on here? This is not Buddhist. Take a look here. There's nothing Buddhist about this. These dongja here, and then this guy in these royal robes. He looks kind of Neo-Confucian royalty, and the great red pine tree in the background landscape, and the tiger. This all seems rather Taoist. This seems like Taoism. And you could tell it's shamanism. Somebody translated to me that, it's the mountain spirit. It represents the mountains. And I thought, wow, that's really amazing. These mountains in this country are very beautiful. And this is the representation of Korean mountains. And it's really interesting. It's Taoist. Why are they worshiping this in a Buddhist temple? And I even saw a Buddhist monk come in and bow down and light incense and candles and bow and do chanting in front of this figure. And I thought, why is a Buddhist monk worshiping a Taoist and shamanic figure? That doesn't make sense. It's like, if in America, if you go into a Christian church, and over at the Christian church, over at the side wall of the church, there's a Buddha statue, and you see the Christian ministers praying to the Buddha statue, you would think, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. That's not right. These are different religions. And in China, they're enemy religions. They don't like each other. What's going on here? And that became my main mantra, kind of my gongan. You might say, if you know about Korean Sunbulgyo, I adopted as my gongan the question, why is a Sanshin-gak in a Korean Buddhist temple? Why is it so important and active and flourishing sort of a cult within Korean Buddhism, and later within Korean Confucianism and other traditions? This became my great question, and I spent the next almost 40 years pursuing that question and all of its all the things linked to that. This is the first one I saw. You notice it's a very funny one, because always these dongja are holding insam, holding a ginseng root, and here the dongja is holding a carrot, a big long carrot, which is like in Korean dang-un. And I wonder if that's even kind of a joke to Dangun, the original founder of Korea, first king. I'm not sure if it's a joke exactly or what. Why is he holding a carrot? And this remains. This painting is no longer displayed at Bubjusa. I became very interested in this whole phenomena here of the Sanshin-gak, or Samsung-gak, as this says, in temples, and the role it played, the function. I heard pretty early, I heard people tell me that these Sanshin-gak, they make more money than even the bupdang, than the main hall of the temple. They take in more income and they get more worship. And I recently discovered an American missionary from 1898 who said the same thing. When he visited a temple, he said he found they had a mountain god and it was more crowded with worshipers and getting donations than was the Buddha hall. Okay, so why? What's that? And then here the Samsung-gak, not Sanshin-gak, but Samsung-gak, which includes Sanshin. Most temples have torn down these old kinds of Sanshin-gak, and this is very evocative with the grass growing on the roof. We love that. And they build a brand new Samsung-gak. And what is that? This became very interesting to me. Why are these three folklore figures in a special shrine? And often these things like this, these temples, these are behind the temple, you know. They're higher up than the Buddha Hall. They're raised in elevation above the Buddha Hall, behind it. And that was very interesting to me too. I thought the Buddha Hall was supposed to be number one, the most important. Why in Korea was this the higher up more important? So this all became very interesting to me right away. I found some of these like this Sanshin, the standing in a Shinjung Tenghwa. You know what that is? The Assembly of the Spirits painting in a Buddhist temple, and with his white crane fan and his basket full of herbs. Most of the shaman gods in these paintings, most of them have weapons, like this giant weapon here, and this guy's got a sword. Mostly in the Shinjung Tenghwa, they're holding weapons. This guy is completely peaceful, the Sanshin, very peaceful, only with this, and healing herbs. He's all about medicine. These are, bolocho, that kind of a Yangji Bosot thing, and also insan, ginseng, of healing and medicine and command of the forces of nature. And here in a Sanshin Tenghwa, the tiger's kind of a crazy, nutty tiger and really big and fat, kind of humor. It's funny going on. Or here, the white tiger, very sacred, especially sacred to Koreans, a white tiger, big hole and such. And then here, you'll notice the detail, the Dongja holding a Buddhist Zen master's fly whisk. This fly whisk is a symbol of Sonbulgyo master, Sunsa, Jinul Bojoguksa, Sunsa, sort of a figure, and holding this in his hand. This seems to mean that Sanshin is a meditation master. He is a Sunsa. Why do they say that? And look also the leaves, the leaf mantle here. Sometimes Sanshin has that, not in these, but here the Dongja has this, leaves here, leaves around his waist. These are symbols from Dangun. I found out later, Dangun artworks, the founder of Korea. And I could give you a whole 2-hour lecture about him, why he's so important. That story, Gechunjul. But anyway, finding all these elements, look at how different these paintings are. And it became a big thing that I first discovered, is that every Sanshin painting is different. If you go to Buddhist temples, the Buddha statues and Buddhist paintings are kind of sort of the same. They're on the same design. They have to be. There's rules in Buddhism for how you must do a Buddha statue and a painting. There's only a few in Korea that are really, a few dozen perhaps, that are outstandingly different Buddha statues or Buddha paintings or Bodhisattva artworks that are really very different. But Sanshin, every one of these is different. Everyone is unique. They are never exactly the same. I have photographed now more than 2,000 of these paintings in shaman shrines and Buddhist temples and Confucian village shrines, more than 2,000, and they're never the same. This is one of my very favorite. You see the dragon head, crooked staff, the intense looking face, and the tiger has gone completely as a leopard. Sometimes has leopard spots as a bit of a joke, but he's like fully a leopard and very glaring and such. This is the famous one that I've featured a lot in my books and presentations, as you may have seen already, Jirisan Omsa, one of our very greatest temples. And this is their artwork. This is at Gyeongsan Shinwonsa at the Jungakdan, the only one of a royal shrines. Korea used to have royal Sanshingak shrines set up by the king, paid for by the king, and the kings would come to worship there sometimes. Held ceremonies twice a year. This goes back to the Three Kingdoms era. Baekje and Shilla had these. And later, under unified Shilla and more, Gyeongsan became the central holy mountain, sometimes the western holy mountain, but usually regarded as central. So Gyeongsan was Jungak. central sacred peak. And this is at the Jungakdan. Again, a unique one, cool donja here, bird, bluebird, magpie here. And you notice here, the very leopardish tiger. There's some way of thinking, look at this, look at the face, look at the tiger, and then look at this. It might have been the same artist. Same artist might have done these. These are before the Korean War. And here, notice how the tiger, of course, is glaring up at the magpie. This is, you know, the kachihorangi motif from Korean folklore paintings that everybody loves. Everybody loves those paintings, the tiger and magpie paintings. And here, this is in the Sanshin. And this is even a royal Sanshin painting sponsored by the King of Korea. You'd think it would just be very serious, but there's humor. There's folklore humor here. The tiger glaring at the magpie, and he knows he can't get the magpie. If he jumps with these paws, jumps with his mouth, the magpie will fly away. He knows he can't get it, so he's angry and frustrated. This is wonderful, wonderful bit of folklore humor in what was actually a very serious shrine of Korea. Antiques, again, these are both, this is an antique from the National Museum, and this is from one of the great temples. The crazy looking tigers, very vivid and kind of distorted, crazy eyes, very lovable. You can see how the Koreans really love the tigers. Think about how really in the villages of Korea, that they were afraid of the tigers. Tigers were scary. Tigers killed people. They grabbed children and take them to the forest, especially in wintertime. As such, they'd be afraid of tigers. But here you can see the Korean people really loved these tigers. Bolocho hanging on his crooked dragon head staff like that. Just wonderful, wonderful artworks here, the staff. I found places like this. This is, of course, Jirisan Chonunsa, one of our most charming temples in all Korea, and San Wang Wi Suk, just on a piece of stone. This is the older way. These kind of paintings, Koreans only started making these kind of paintings like 300 years ago, after the Imjin Weran and brought so many Chinese soldiers here, or brought their Chinese Taoist artworks with them. And after that, Koreans making paintings and statues of Sanshin. But before this, the older way, and the very old, this stone right here, this is right here. You see, this is the old kind of stone shrine, and this still exists at the back of Chonunsa. Really fascinating to point out to people and talk about. Sanshin worship is really one of the oldest things we know about Korean culture. The Dangun story mentions Sanshin. The Gwanggye-to monument in Manchuria mentions Sanshin. The earliest Shilla monument carving mentions Sanshin on there. It's just one of the earliest things we know about Korea, and very consistent. I'll show you just one more. This is a treasure of Korea, officially designated a Bo. This is of Gayasan Heinsa, and it's an old antique, and it's really Buddhist. This is a really unusual Buddhist kind of Sanshin with the bald head, the naked chest, the robes off the shoulders, and he's sitting on the tiger with his feet up, kind of like a meditation yoga position. And here he's holding a copy, not only a Bolocho thing, but a copy of Buddhist Sutra, Buddhist, maybe Lotus Sutra, or something like that, on his staff, holding it here on the donja. And there's also a guardian with a sword. This is the only one in the entire nation of a traditional Sanshin painting that has a weapon in it, that has a military weapon that this guy is holding. Doesn't he look a little like a Japanese samurai warrior? In fact, this is probably painted somewhere after the Imjin Weran. What is he doing in this painting? We don't know. It was 400 years ago. But this is a magnificent one of just the variety. Again, all these paintings are different, individual, unique. There's really no rules. That's the thing. Buddhist artwork, they have rules. These do not have rules. Okay, you want to take a little break right now? And I don't mind if there's any questions so far, if anybody wants to ask a question now, just about what I've covered so far.
Okay. So actually we have two questions here. So I think yeah. Can you see that the messenger, the chat?
Yeah, let me take a look.
Uh,
Stop sharing and yeah, okay, messenger. Yeah.
okay. So
This one
actually
here.
we can do and answering for these questions. Actually, is quite interesting.
Sure.
Here. Here.
Okay. Now, by the way, you have to write these in English. My Korean is not so good. Friends of mine, like Peter Bartholomew, the Hanok guy, whatever, very, very fluent in Korean, totally fluent. But I never got there. I'm sorry to say, I have a brain problem about foreign languages. Anyway, big tombs, mountain belief. Yes. I think these tombs from like Central Asia, steppes, and through, still found in Mongolia, the big mound tombs like we see in Gyeongju, I think they are kind of an imitation mountain. Yes, I would agree. And the body of the person put under, it's also just for the security, of course, that it's very difficult for robbers to get in there. China did the same thing. China has giant mounds, even really gigantic for its greatest emperors, that some of them really even look like a mountain. Yes. And then, no, from our foundation myth where Huanung came from heaven. Yep, I know that very well. Even if he and his followers were from heaven, they came down from a big mountain. Maybe. Well, we're not sure. It says they came from heaven. Therefore, we worship the mountain. Connection is there. And Dangun died to the mountain, became Shinsun, Taoist hermit. Yeah, the Gechunjul myth of the Samguk Yusa, first chapter in the Samguk Yusa, said he became Sanshin, actually. Not only just a Shinsun, but definitely a Sanshin. And we think the best guess for traditional belief is that happened at Guwol-san, which is in Hwanghae province of North Korea. It's on the Taedong River, down from Pyongyang, which may have been the original Asadal mentioned in the myth and such. And this Guwol-san, and North Korea has a large shrine there, an old traditional shrine. We don't know how old because we can't research it, but I have photos of that shrine. Haven't been there yet, but at Guwol-san, there's a shrine for Hwanin, Hwanung, and Dangun, the original kind of Samsungak, like we have a few of those in South Korea now in modern times. Yeah. So it's all very connected. The Taoist idea of Shinsun, which is still very strong in like Hanguk Songdo, Korean Taoist traditions, and with like Go-un Chechiwan, when he died at Gayasan, he became a Shinsun, and Shinsun is connected to Sanshin, and Dangun became a Sanshin. Some professors say that Dangun became all of the Sanshin in Korea. My friend in England argues that strongly. A British guy who studied Samguk Yusa very, very, very much. He said Dangun became all the Sanshin, and I don't think so. I think Dangun became Sanshin only of one mountain, Guwol-san, and other mountains have their own Sanshin of ancient origin. It's a good debate between us. It's not settled yet. Now, the difference between Dangun as a Taoist hermit and Jesok, well, I would say those are quite different. Jesok, as found in the center of a Shinjung Tenghwa or in the Chilsung paintings, the Chilsung Tenghwa, at the center always, Jesok Bul, he's Indra. His name is Indra from India. He's a Hindu god of India, and he's surrounded by all these other gods. All the 7 stars are really, in a Korean Shinjung Tenghwa, it's usually 49 stars. in the more modern ones, 7 times 7, because of the 7 times 7 days that people do funeral rites after someone dies in Korean Buddhism. Jaesuk is kind of manager of the gods. He assigns the gods to their positions, you understand, for a few thousand years. Okay, now we're going to change. You become an earth spirit. You become a disease spirit, smallpox spirit, or a coronavirus spirit, and you become a mountain spirit, and you become the one of the star spirits. And he does that. He assigns people to their job. He's the manager of heaven. That doesn't mean he's not the Okwang Sangje. He's not the top lord of heaven. That's Okwang Sangje, of course. But he's the manager who assigns people what they should do and such. So he, within Buddhism and within the Chilsung cult, Chilsung is very important, maybe number 2, second most important in Korean shamanism after the Sanshin. That's the role of Jaesuk, and that's not Dangun. However, the Samguk Yusa, the first chapter, the story of Dangun, they start off saying that Hwanin is Jaesuk. That Jaesuk is another name for Hwanin, the Lord of Heaven. Now, this really doesn't fit, and I think Master Irian, in writing this, he's trying to make the story more Buddhist. He's trying to relate it more with Buddhism, because in the Goryeo dynasty, Buddhism was so strong, so official. So that's why he said that, but I don't think that's an original part of the myth. I think he gave several different names for Hwanin. What he more should, Hwanin is really more like Okwang Sangje, the Lord King of Heaven, not Jaesuk. But everything is related. Okay.
Okay.
Now,
So let me just break for 10 minutes. Anyone who wants to go some break? Okay. Then we start second class at 8 o'clock. Okay. So 교수님, Professor, maybe you can have some water, drink water, or rest for a while.
Sure, I will.
Okay. All right.
See you in 10 minutes, everybody.
Okay. 자, 10분 쉬고 8시에 시작하도록 하겠습니다.
No. They're just taking a break. She wants to, like, every 30 minutes, they're going to, I've already gone for 50 minutes break. She wants to take a 10-minute break. You know, my other presentations, I just burn straight through it for 2 hours. You want hot one? Break to do my thing. I'm still having a little bit. And I've been pissing some, so that's a good thing. If you have diarrhea, you can't piss. All the water in your body goes into the intestines, so you don't piss. But I really good long piss before.
I think I need ginger. Ginger.
Did you feed the vein something?
Yeah, I asked them to feed the vein. I got this feeling of same as with how you feel. What's hot now? Where's your ginger?
No, it's not really hot. It's already warm. You can test it. You can find that out. After I get finished with all this at 9, I do hope they can watch some videos. Depending. Please be tolerant for all that. Absolute quiet. That's all right. I need to relax after this. Okay. We'll be getting ready
Okay,
to go.
welcome back. Okay. Sorry.
Pretty soon.
자, 들어오세요. 자, 시작하겠습니다. 저희가 이걸 해보면 목이 많이 말라요. 이렇게 말씀 많이 하시면. I think why we have a break for 10 minutes, we used to have a guest speaker. When the guest speak on hour without stop, it's a really hard work. So that's why we break for 10 minutes.
It is hard work, but
Yeah.
recently in my online presentations, I have been doing that. I've been going for even 2 hours straight. Once I really get started, it's hard to stop.
Okay. All right. So please.
By the way, starting next week, next Tuesday, for 4 weeks in a row, I'm doing the set of presentations for the Seoul Global Culture Center. And I'll see if I can find the announcement for that, but I'll send it to you, certainly, Jenny. And maybe you could share that with everybody. Maybe some of these people, if you want to hear more from me, there's going to be a presentation, 4 presentations for 4 Tuesdays in a row, which the first one is about general theory of Korean history, general overview, and a focus on the UNESCO World Cultural Heritage Sites that show the different parts of Korean history, the different eras, and here in kind of an organized way. And I think that would help many of you to have kind of an organization in English about Korean history, kind of an overview that kind of makes sense as a framework. And then the second one will be about Korean Buddhism, the third one about Korean shamanism, and the fourth one about Korean Neo-Confucianism, Sungnihak of Joseon. So I'll send you the details, and it's for free. It's for free from Seoul Global Center. Anybody can join in and watch for free.
Okay, so I'm gonna share when you send me a link.
I will.
For the
I'll try at the next break time. I'll try to find it.
Okay.
Just remembered that. Okay, now then we are back here, and where were we? We were here at people at Samsonggak. This is a new thing in Korean Buddhism. It's not an old traditional thing. It took over from the old Sanchin-gak and Chilsung-gak, Deokseong-gak being separate. The Samsonggak, actually they have a building with this name in Chinese Buddhist temples, but it's 3 different kinds of Buddha. Here, this kind of Samsonggak that we have in most Korean temples by these days is a uniquely Korean thing, and it's more interesting than you might think. Just to show the inside of one of these, a real small and simple one, a Samsonggak includes Sanshin and Chilsung, the 7 stars, you know that, and Deokseong, the lonely saint, the lone saint, Deokseong, same like the Dokdo Islands. And these are together in one building. Sometimes there's others, sometimes there's Dangun, sometimes there's Yongwang included here, along with or in place of one of these others. Always Korea has variety, but this is the standard thing to have Sanshin, Deoksung, and Chilsung. Chilsung is usually in the center. And what I would like to point out is that this exemplifies the ancient and very basic philosophy of Chunji-in. That's why these three are together. This is my own theory, my own discovery, but it's true. I think you all know what Chunji-in is, heaven, earth, and humanity, as a kind of trinity. Such. It goes along with Yang as one of the most ancient, basic Chinese philosophical principles. The Chinese had these concepts of Yang and Chunji-in as two contrasting things, and then a trinity of three. They had that more than 3,000 years ago. And it appears in the Juyukyung, the Book of Changes, or the I Ching. Very, very important. And you've seen those symbols on the Korean flag, of course, the Korean Taeguki flag. It has the symbols from the Juyukyung up there, and you can explain this. Now, the reason why those trigrams, sets of three lines, the reason why there's three of them, it's Chunji-in. And each of those lines is either a broken line or a solid line, and that's Yang. The solid lines are Yang, and the broken lines are Yin. But there's three of them in each set, and that's Chunji-in, heaven, earth, and humanity. And this is exemplified in this shrine. Of course, Chilsung is heaven, the greatest powers of heaven. Sanshin is earth, Ji. The greatest thing of the earth is the mountains, right? The greatest manifestation of earth is mountain. And Deoksung, as an enlightened disciple of Buddha, is the very best kind of human being. The In, exemplary, the best. So the best lights of heaven, the seven stars, and often here the sun and moon are in these paintings, sun and moon and other great stars, the best lights of heaven, the best manifestation of earth, the best of humanity. As you know, I'm sure you know, you've seen around, Chunji-in is very common all over Korea in the architecture, like in the ponds of royal palace compounds, the square pond with a round island inside of it and a pine tree or a stone pagoda or something like that standing straight up on it. That's Chunji-in, also embedded in there. And also in the Bisuk, yeah, you know, the famous Bisuk monuments that have a turtle at the bottom and a cap of dragons on the top, and then a stele of human history in between, the big black stone of human history. That's Chunji-in. Also, Chunji-in is everywhere as a principle, and if you point this out as a tour guide and explain it in a very simple way, people will enjoy that. I would say, especially if you have tourists from China. When I teach Chinese students about this, and they get very excited to see their own culture's ancient philosophy so very vividly depicted in Korea in so many ways. In many ways, it's been lost in China itself. It's another great Sanshin painting, one of my favorites. Again, totally leopard style tiger. He's holding a deer antler. The four different dongja holding healing or symbols of fertility, fecundity items. And here, notice his rather sad looking face, but he has the mantle of Dangun, the mantle from Dangun's shoulders, showing how Sanshin is related to Dangun, just kind of suggesting Dangun in many Sanshin paintings. This is something I tell people. I wrote this like 22 years ago for my Sanshin book, but Korean Sanshin traditions hold an axial position in Korean culture, an axis, a hub, in other words, like the axle of a wheel, the center point that other religions connect to. Sanshin is kind of the hub that others connect to. They remain pervasive and vibrant everywhere. This is unlike what my students told me at the beginning when I came to Korea. They said, oh, we don't do that anymore, but yes, you do. In fact, there's more Sanshin gak and more Sanshin paintings in Korea now than there ever was in Joseon Dynasty times, many more. I estimate there's 15 to 20,000 of such artworks and such altar and shrines just around South Korea, a rather small country. Their forms and roles are still noticeably evolving within Korean Buddhism. It's evolving, it's developing. It's not a dead tradition. It's not just history. There's modern new developments. New and larger icons and shrines are built, and more Korean Buddhist motif elements are incorporated within them. This is a developing thing, and every year I see some things that I've never seen before. This is a kind of newly created, a modern Sanshin icon from about the year 2000. This was painted. Notice just how elaborate, much more than Joseon Dynasty, simple ones, but so many different things going on here, like the Sundo Peaches of Immortality, the usual dongja, but over here, a pair of male and female deer, and female deer's got a ginseng root here, maybe gonna make medicine for the male, something like this, right? And the dongja here with a golden teapot preparing some herbal medicine tea, the pheasants here, balocho on the rocks, cranes in the tree, magnificent red pine tree, the waterfall, the cranes over here, and turtle. Now, these elements you see here are many of the shipjangsang. And certainly you should know about the shipjangsang, and I'll point that out, explain that to tour people. Again, now shipjangsang comes from Chinese Taoism, but became very strong part of Korean Taoism, Hanguk Sundo, but then part of Korean Neo-Confucianism. Shipjangsang paintings in the palaces, very famously, and one of the great wall carvings there at Gyeongbokgung. Such a shipjangsang, very common and lovely thing to point out. Shipjangsang paintings are very beautiful. They're very lovely. Foreigners love them when you call your attention to them. And some of the Sanshin paintings like this, filled with shipjangsang. This is oh, by the way, this is in one of the smallest obscure temples you're ever going to find. This great Sanshin painting, which is like 3 meters wide, 2 meters tall. It's gigantic and very expensive, but it's at a small temple on Jindo Island in the far southwest. The biggest, greatest Buddhist temples do not have the biggest, greatest Sanshin paintings. It's an interesting thing. You often find smaller ones. This is at a fairly famous temple, the Bodhyam, out on Ganghwa Island, Sokmogo, separate island of Ganghwa area, dedicated to Gwanseom Bosal. And this has 2 tigers, interestingly, not unique, but pretty rare, 2 tigers and 2 waterfalls, a real duality expressed here. Okay. And also let's mention female Sanshin paintings, Sanshin Halmani. There are very many of these around Jirisan, which is considered to be a mainly female spirit mountain, the great grandmother of all Korea, the matriarch of Korea, or Mago, as some modern cultists are calling that figure now in the last 30 years or so. And also at Gyeongsan and certain other mountains, female Sanshin icons. You used to never see these, or hardly, almost never, in the traditional times, as Confucianism was so patriarchal. And that was true right up through the 1980s when I was exploring. This is one of the very first I ever saw. and such. And as the status, you might say, of Korean women in society has been raising throughout the 20th century, female sanshin figures are coming forward. And there are even male and female sanshin couple paintings. No time for that. I would show this. Again, this is something you would not expect. This is the biggest sanshin statue in all of Korea, biggest one of the whole nation, and it's in Incheon City, out there. And you know, Incheon doesn't have very much in the way of mountains, not too many. Incheon is not famous for mountains at all, except on Ganghwa Island as the three holy mountains of Ganghwa. But the mainland Incheon, this is on mainland Incheon at that Cheonggyeongsan mountain, Blue Dragon Mountain, a rather small temple, but the spectacular, huge Sanshin statue. And this is Sanshin Gak that has 77 golden, actually they're probably made of bronze, but polished like gold Sanshin statues inside of it. Pretty amazing. And you wouldn't expect to find this in Incheon, but yeah, there it is. Unique new developments in Sanshin like this. Again, a pair of tigers, a male and female tiger here with Sanshin. This is down at Jirisan, and this idea of a bodhisattva riding on the tiger, coming in to visit Sanshin, a Buddhist bodhisattva, shows the mixture of the religions. There are many artworks like this these days. This one from Taebaeksan, the great Taebaeksan of Gangwon-do, on the border, and shows the Buddhist monk, the master of the temple, as a kind of a child, innocent child, a Buddhist monk, riding on the tiger to come visit the Sanshin and talk to him. The abbot of this temple there at Taebaeksan Danggol, he had a dream. He had the dream like this, and then afterwards he commissioned an artist to make this painting showing his dream of his visit to the Sanshin. This shows how these increasing interlinking. And I like to show this one. It's from Jeju-do, a rather little known temple on Jeju-do, and it's silver, made out of pure silver paint here. And they also have the Chilsung and Deoksung done in the same way. Very expensive powdered silver paint. And again, this is like 3 meters by 2 meters. That's a lot of silver done. So this really finding this stuff really begin to understand that Sanshin is not dead. It's not dying. It's not part of Korean history. If somebody's willing to pay this much money from donations to make a solid silver Sanshin painting, that's not dead. Then I would tell you this story, one of my great stories. This is at Jirisan, Sudawam, about halfway up the Nogodan Peak area from Hwaumsan, Chanunsa. And I visited this temple. Actually, it's kind of built like a fortress. You can see here, it looks like a fortress, a military castle halfway up. It's a very secret place, secluded. They don't welcome the public. And actually, when I came here, the gates were locked. And I had a very strong feeling, however, I had to get inside. There was some reason that I had to get inside this temple. So I broke in. I'm sorry to say I was a criminal. I went around the side by the Wajangshil and found a way to climb in, broke into it. I just felt I had to. And in the back of the compound at first, up above the Wajangshil and finding it back, I found this Sanshin shrine with the old stone Sanwang Wisa thing and the tiger over here. And so she found this old thing, and I thought that was their Sanshin shrine. But then going deeper into the main part of the temple by the main hall, and next to the main hall, there was this. See, that's the old Sanshin Gak, the old one, and then the main hall is down here in front. And this thing, Sanwang Daejun, that's a Buddhist name, meaning a great hall. You'd say, Daegwang Daejun or something like that for a great Buddha hall, but it says Mountain King Great Hall. This is the biggest Sanshin-gak ever built in Korea. Number one, much bigger than anything ever built in Joseon Dynasty times, bigger than the royal Sanshin shrines. And this was just built around the year 2000 in Korea. When I discovered this, I really thought that Sanshin was not a dying figure in Korea. I realized this. I think of how expensive a building like this, made out of wood with traditional roof, it takes like $1 million to build a big building like this. And when I went to this hall, the whole temple was empty. I never saw anybody, and I was really scared of getting caught, since I broke into the temple like a criminal. And I went up here on the porch of this building, and suddenly the door opened of this building, and he walked out. He steps out of the building and just looks at me, and he said in Korean, he said, "So you have come." And I was like, "What?" I thought he was going to call the police or something, but no, he invited me inside. He thought I should be there. We took this photo later when I was leaving. He's Pyeongjeon Sanim, who he died 5 or 6 years ago, but he used to be one of the greatest Buddhist Sunsa, Zen masters of Korea. He was a brother monk with Songchol Sanim, the very famous Songchol Sanim of Haeinsa. And so a very leading meditation master. And he's the one that built this gigantic mountain spirit shrine. He invited me inside, and I found this. This is a little distorted in width, but basically this is 6 meters wide, 6 meters end to end, and 4 meters tall. The whole painting, the biggest Sanshin painting ever made in all of Korean history, I'm pretty sure. And it was made in the year 2000. So somebody spent amazing amount of money to do this. It's not dying. Notice the two female looking bodhisattvas and then the male Sanshin figure in between with 2 tigers. Pyeongjeon told me that this represents the Chunwanbong female Sanshin, the Nogodan female Sanshin, and in between them, the Banyabong male Sanshin. And these 2 tigers represent the 2 great valleys of Jirisan that are in between those 3 great peaks. So a grand representation of Jirisan, and it turned out that Master Pyeongjeon had a strong relation with Sanshin. I really enjoyed this is me in the early days, again, wearing a beard to not look like a soldier, but here in the summertime and here more in September, visiting Buddhist temples and getting to talk to the abbots. This is on Gyeongju Namsan. This guy used to be pretty famous as a Shinsan, regarded as a Shinsan of Gyeongju Namsan. He lived there at Sangshinsa on the slope of Namsan above the Samnong-gol. He lived there for like 40 years. And this is a powerful abbot of Odaesan Woljongsa at that time. And I really enjoyed getting to know him. And he was later abbot of some other great temples and was a friend for a while. So this guy just visiting part of my history. And I would mention Bulguksa Sokaram. I don't have to tell you about this. You know everything about it. Some of the most famous, but when I first visited in 1982, September, and again, you understand, I studied Buddhism in the university, and I studied Buddhist art in the university, paintings and statues of the world in university course, and there was nothing of Korea. This was not there. And when I first came to Gyeongju in September, I was going to Busan to get to Japan to change my visa. You had to do that in those days, like every 3 months, get a new visa. And I went to this place and I was astounded. I was just floored. I had my mouth open. This was so amazing, fantastic, such incredible architecture from such an ancient time, 750 AD, and this absolutely perfect. I thought it was the greatest Buddhist statue I'd ever seen. And then I'm thinking, why don't I know this? Why don't I know about this? Why isn't this famous all over the world? What's wrong here? This mystery country. Nowadays, these days, this is in the textbooks. This and this, they're actually in the textbooks of global Buddhist study, but they sure were not in the 1980s. And I did what I could to help make that happen. You know all about the Buddha Kingdom Temple. You're very familiar. And the Tabotap and Sokotap, some of our greatest stone treasures of the nation, as well as the other national treasures and simple treasures in this temple. 7 national treasures, if you include the Sokaram, 7 of them. And that's greatest of the most number of national treasures in any temple. And these are, Tabotap is maybe the number 1 most amazing, astounding, and precious pagoda of the nation here. And you know these, you know about this. And you know this. Now, I want to tell you a story about this. Sokaram, that's where it is, and near the peak of the mountain, quite isolated in the forest, and so amazing. And just really a favorite of mine. I got to go inside here once, go inside and walk around it and worship in front of it, a very special privilege. And behind the main Buddha, this 11-headed Kwanseum Bosal, which is again one of the best stone carvings in all of Korea. Okay, I want to tell you this story here, my Richard Bloom story. This is Richard Bloom. Talk about being a VIP tour guide. You see here. Now, this is Dianne Feinstein. It's his wife. She is one of the most powerful people in the United States government. She's the senior senator from California. She's been a senator from California for 30 years, very senior, and she's one of the bosses of Washington, D.C., running America. This is her husband. Richard Bloom is her husband. They don't share the same name. They're both previously married. He's a billionaire real estate developer, huge property owning guy and developer. He's a Buddhist. Richard Bloom is a Buddhist. She really isn't, but he is, and he follows the Dalai Lama from Tibet. He is one of the big Hollywood Buddhists, along with Richard Gere and Tina Turner and some other big Hollywood stars, follows Buddhism. And this guy, Richard Bloom, has been all over the world visiting Buddhist temples. He actually runs a billion-dollar foundation of helping repair and restore great historic Buddhist temples all over Southeast Asia and India, places like Cambodia, etc. He's very much involved in this. And so he's been everywhere. Of course, Japan, he's been all over China, been to every Buddhist temple in the world. But this was his first visit in 2005, his first visit to Korea. He was here to buy the Hana Bank. You might have heard about that foreigners bought Hana Unheng, and he was one of the foreigner billionaires who was involved in buying that. And Hana Bank, Hana Unheng, hired me to take him and the other buyers, there were 6 other billionaire men, take them down to Gyeongju for one day and show them Gyeongju, 2005. So we do this, and the other 6 men are not interested. They don't care about Buddhism. I got tired of them very quickly, but Richard was very interested, and he was astounded by Gyeongju, and especially Bulguksa. When I took them to Bulguksa, and he was amazed at those pagodas and at the treasured Buddha statues and the Daeunjong and other buildings. Really, really enjoyed it. But then I took him up here to Sokaram, and we were standing right here in front of the glass plate window. And Richard Bloom, just like me in 1982, just to say, was just standing there with his mouth open in amazement and astounded, staring at this here. And he was just silent. He didn't say any word. And he looked at the 11-head guanseum on a photo, such that I showed him. And then he walked out. It was after several minutes, walked out of there, walked to the steps, and then he turned and he looked at me and he said, "Why don't I know about that?" And I said, "Welcome to Korea, sir. We are the mystery country. We are the unknown country where nobody knows." He said, "That's one of the best Buddha statue, the grotto situations in the world. One of the best in the world." And I said, yeah, I think so. I think it is. But nobody knows about it. This was Korea. Now, thanks to, of course, K-pop and Psy and these other things, these aspects of the Hallyu, the Korean wave that I worked on when I worked for Munhwa Gwangwangbu back in the early 2000s for the World Cup thing. Thanks to all that, Korea is much better known now. But it's pretty amusing. You would be astounded just how little known. And something like this is still underknown in the world. Of all the great religious treasures, famous religious places like in Italy or France or whatever, this belongs to be in the very top of the whole world. It's like one of the top 10 or something. And still, most people have never heard of it. Most global travelers, people don't know. I would like to bring up my mentor, my own personal teacher for more than a decade, Hore Jojayong. He lived on the Korean traditional dates here, but the Dangi, but here 1925 to 2000. He grew up in Japanese colonialism and such. He was a great genius of Korean folk arts and traditional religions. Please see my website to learn about him. He became my teacher. Not only was he Korean, but he also spoke fluent Japanese because of his youth, and he spoke fluent English because he studied at MIT in America. He was a rich and successful man, but really devoted to sanshin, to tiger paintings, to Korean folk arts. And it's because of him that the Min속문화 movement, that most of that was preserved. He did that, starting as Park Chung-hee started to destroy all the folklore in the villages in the 1960s with Semaul Undong. He was the one working against that under government oppression, trying to save Korea's folklore, and especially the Min속문화 and such. Please have a look at my website after this, and there's a whole section about him. I got about 20 pages about him and what he accomplished in this. He's very important. This is around when we first met. This is in 1988. He made these kind of ohang jangsung of the 5 directions, not just 2 jangsung together of heaven and earth like usual, but ohang jangsung. And here we're posing, and that's a young Japanese scholar and myself. He became my teacher, and he's the one who encouraged me to write the book about sanshin. This was his compound. He built this. This still exists at Sognisan. This is just outside of Sognisan National Park, outside the Bobjusa entrance. This compound, he designed these traditional Korean buildings and artworks, and he carved things like this, or friends of his did, and he used to hold festivals here. We'd build a big fire and hold traditional culture festivals of Korea here. And this is the book. Then he encouraged me to write this book for more than a decade, and he advised me, and I went all over the nation studying and got what I could, and we produced this book. And this book was published just about the same time that he died, and that was meaningful. He passed away, and I went to his funeral, and I had a copy of the book to bring. I was going to bring to him to give him a copy of the book, of course, with autograph, but he died before I could. This book became rather famous, and it was judged Book of the Year in the year 2000 the best book on Korean cultural traditions. And so the government translated it into this. The government paid to make this Korean version of my book, and this is still on sale at Kyobo and other famous bookstore places of Korea, or online booksellers, whatever, This book is still available, and it's still the main book even today, 20 years later. This is still the main book about Sanchin. Korean professors never did that. This is his funeral, Jo Jae-yong. This is before he died. I was traveling to visit him, and we performed at his funeral and had a whole shaman ceremony and such for his passing with all the leaders of Korean folk art and folklore. Grand Manchin Kim Kum-hwa, one of the most famous, just died in 20, or maybe that's wrong. It was actually I think it was early 2019, now that I remember. She was a good friend of Jo Jae-yong, and she performed the gut for his funeral. And I was good friends with her also, although she could not speak English, but still we got along, and I'm still involved with some of her disciples. As you know, she's very famous in Incheon City, became the leading shaman of Incheon for its maritime. This is the tomb of Jo Jae-yong, his tomb at Sognisan. Here's tomb and his wife, and these are the Samsung, the Sanchin, Chilsung, and Deoksung painting carvings that Jo Jae-yong made himself. Friends of mine here visiting the tomb and bowing at the tomb. This is Kim Kum-hwa, the shaman. We would go there together and respect him. And his tomb is right below this peak at his nickname was Hore, tiger. He was called the Tiger of Sognisan, and his tomb is right below in the valley down here for this peak, which looks a bit like a tiger head. Can you see this? The tiger mouth here and the eyes and such. So he's buried right under that, one of his favorite. This is us, me and my friends at his funeral with Kim Kum-hwa. Some of the artworks he made of Korean folklore, kind of reinventing the traditions. Sanchin and Samshin, the Samshin, like Samshin Halmoni, the shaman character, and the Chilsung, 7 stars. And here also Sanchin Halmoni, but riding on a turtle as kind of an earth spirit, and the Chilsung with a bird in the sky, and Sanchin with tiger. And later, 10 years later, after he died, 2010, we erected a big bisok to tell about him in front of his tomb. And this is here permanently. Notice the dokgebi. And Jo Jae-yong loved dokgebi people, and all of his followers, including mostly Korean leaders of folklore, but some of them are foreigners. Yoon Yil-soo, if you've heard of him, one of the great Minsok-minwa leaders, interpreters, and also of shamanic bujok, shamanic talismans. He's a great professor of that, giving a speech. And this is the back of the bisok with Jo Jae-yong's biography, and has my name and the name of a few of my friends who are also devoted to him during his lifetime, foreign student disciples of him. This one, Fred Jeremy Seligson, that's him right here. Gotcha. There we are gathered together. There's me, and there's Jeremy Seligson and the others. So anyway, Peter Bartholomew, my friend, very important here, it was Suwon Hwasong Fortress, very much involved in the reconstruction of this, especially the Hengung, or the alternative palace, supplementary palace inside here. Peter Bartholomew involved with that. That's why I have this in this slideshow. You know all about this. And Dasan Jongyak-yong, great hero, a great genius, kind of a Leonardo da Vinci of Korea. But again, not so well known, internationally not well known, but he should be. In the 1990s, I earned my MA in Korean Studies in the History of Korean Religions at Yonsei University in their GSIS program, which was a new thing then, but probably is the best English language graduate school in Korea today by now, but it was just starting then. I just joined in their very first year when they opened it. And that's how I got educated. Now, these are other books that I did. I started, this was way back in 1986. I did this book for the Palpal Olympics, you know, the Seoul 88 Summer Olympics. I wrote this book, Modern Hotel English, because Korea really didn't have their own English book, and this was related to the Olympics. There was a lot of kind of Olympic English in this book. I wrote it to get things going, and later books like this as kind of coffee table books to explain about Korea. I wrote essays. And this is the Lonely Planet guidebook. I told you how when I first came here, Korea was just the back part of the Japan Lonely Planet book, and later Lonely Planet put Korea and Taiwan together in the same book, South Korea and Taiwan. Nothing about this. And finally, this was 1996. Finally, Lonely Planet agreed to my proposal to make a complete Korea book just about Korea, North and South Korea. And the two of us wrote this together. We were co-authors in this, published in 1997, just in time for the IMF Shide problem that hit and such. But this was a good accomplishment for Korean tourism. We have a complete book and much more accurate, much accurate information about the best places in Korea. My own maps. This is another something involving with shamanism. I used to do this a lot, visit Taebaeksan for Gyecheonjul. You see up here, right here on the very peak, this is the 7th highest peak, the Cheonjedan of Taebaeksan, the 7th highest peak in all of South Korea, and there's no trees on it, so you have a fantastic view. And on this peak right here, that's this ceremony. And this is something where foreigners don't know about. As foreigners almost never go there, including to today, but it's really fantastic. This is real Korean culture. This is deep Korean culture. This is not something put on for tourists. This is really sincere stuff. There can be like 1,000 Koreans on top of the peak this morning, really devoted to Dangun, Hwanung, Hwanin, and doing this ceremony. And I started going up there in the early, like about 1990, I think was the first time. And certainly I was the only foreigner ever to be up here back in those days. During the 2000s, some of the other English teachers and such started coming here, but this is kind of real Korean culture, deep Korean culture, remote, far remote. This is me. I bought students of mine. This girl is my student, very fluent in English from Yonsei University, where I was teaching at that time, also teaching, and she translated for me with this leader of the Taejong-gyo, and these are my students acting out at the Taebaeksan Monument. I brought them up here from Yonsei University to show them this. They were surprised, they were astounded. They'd never heard of this, they had no idea. Yeah, we're burning. We would write our wishes on a piece of paper, set the paper on fire, and then the paper floats upward into the heaven from Taebaeksan and brings our wish up high and such. Participating in this. And they were very happy, very welcoming to have a foreigner, to have an American, join in with this kind of ceremony and be a part. And here, this guy was introducing me, and he gave me the microphone. He let me give a little speech to the crowd of 1,000 Koreans up there about the meaning and importance of Dangun traditions, and she translated for the crowd. So I worked for the government, the Munhwa Gwangwangbu. I worked on the first Pyeongchang Winter Olympics bid, which was eventually successful after 3 times. I worked on the Temple Stay program. I helped to get Temple Stay started. It was the very first, I was the original tour guide of Temple Stay, the first Temple Stay guide of the very first events. And I held classes and taught the Buddhist monks and the Buddhist volunteers. I taught them what to say, how to say it to foreigners to make it make sense. Like, you know, something like Munsu Bosal or Bohyun Bosal. Who is that? How do you say that in English to make it make sense to foreigners? I taught this kind of program, got Temple Stay going, and also developed this foundation later for the United Nations World Tourism Organization. Kind of a peak point of my career. For doing that, is Kim Dae-jung and his wife, Lee Hee-ho, great heroes of mine. I really respected him for, of course, democracy, and I was working for him, for the Munhwa Gongwangbu under him, and he congratulated me and he gave me a wristwatch, which I still treasure for doing this stuff. And Temple Stay, it started in spring 2002 for the World Cup finals as part of the visit. It was just supposed to be a temporary program, just temporary, but it's blossomed. It's still going on now. Temple Stay is almost 20 years old. It just passed its 19th anniversary. Next year will be 20th anniversary. Temple Stay has been very successful. In fact, I would say it is the most successful thing I ever worked on in Korea. The most successful project. Many projects I did with the government were kind of a failure, you know, or only partway successful. But Temple Stay was a great success. And I developed the English for the Temple Stay program, and it's now very popular. You know, 10,000 or 20,000 foreigners were doing this every year before coronavirus. Many of my students of the university still, my international students, they go do Temple Stay for a weekend. Very popular. This is the very first Temple Stay that was ever held, April 2002, and the guests were the ambassadors to Korea and other VIP. These are all ambassadors from various countries like Hungary and Turkey and I think Belgium and such. And this is me as the tour guide getting my bowl of water from the monk and all this. If any of you, if you're aware of Korea's political history, we had some VIPs here. That's Kwon Jung-dal. You know who he was part of the Chundewan regime and later leader of the National Assembly, and he was the backer of No Tae-woo to be president, and later Kim Young-sam. He was a powerful political figure under all of those, from Chundewan through Kim Young-sam. And he was a member of our Temple Stay event, and that's his wife, who was running Korean tourism at the time. These are things you might not know so much about, but we did this at Jikjisa, you know, right in the middle of Korea, one of the greatest of the temples, very first Temple Stay and such. And later Temple Stay with this slogan, one of their key slogans they've used, and very popular. And, you know, they do this in many languages by now. They do it in up to 10 different languages possibly. And Temple Stay became very important among Koreans, popular among Koreans. Many Korean families now do Temple Stay in the Korean language, or some Koreans join the Temple Stay in English just as a way of practicing English. And I would recommend that to you if you are tour guides and if you want to know more about Korean Buddhism to explain in English to your tour groups and such. You should do a Temple Stay event. They don't even cost very much. It's like 5만 or 6만 원. For the weekend, 24-hour experience, and you go do a Temple Stay in English. Go together with the foreigners and you learn there about English-speaking Korean Buddhism. I recommend that. And of course, this is the only such program in the entire world of staying in Buddhist temples, and it's a unified program of all the temples in the nation that offer this, and has its own website in like 10 different languages. We're very proud of this. We're very proud, very successful in a good part of Korean Buddhism. Led me into being, by 2000, I started tour guiding. This is at Taebaeksan, Dangun Sunjung, and things like this at Buddhist temples, and lecturing, and Cheonggyeongsan, and this is in Seoul, and this is at Gyeongsan at a Neo-Confucian ceremony for Sanchinje, in this, things like this. So just starting being a tour guide and participating in this sort of a thing going around. 19 years. This is like bringing foreigners to see Korean shamanism. This is right in Seoul at the Guksadang on Inwangsan, and leading foreigners up Inwangsan to see the shamanism. This is like late in November, and they get to, at the Guksadang, real shamanism being performed in here, and they get to take some photos, take some videos. These are international women resident in Korea, the Seoul International Women's Association, for whom I've done many tours over the years. Oh, I got to know another thing from this book. He got this book, Do Old Kim Young-ok. You know who he is? Pretty famous. He's like a public philosopher and controversial television personality in Korea. He got my book and he read the book in English. He actually, his English is very good. And he read the book in English and he took notes and he made criticisms of my book. He called me to visit his office and he pointed out things that he disagreed with and some things he agreed with about my book. And then he sat down and he made this painting for me, one of my greatest personal treasures. He made this painting. He said, this tiger is Sanchin of the Bekdudegan, represented from my work, and he put this poetry on here explaining, and we put these his stamps and my stamps on it as such, and had a good relation through him. Oh, I already showed that painting before. I already did that. Sanchinje at Jirisan. Sorry, this is repetitive of what I already had. Yeah, Sudoan. This is Pyongyang master after his death. After I worked for the government, after Munhwa Gongbangbu, I got the job at Kyunghee University. Kyunghee Dehakyo was professor of Korean cultural tourism. I don't even have a degree in tourism. I never got a degree in tourism, but they made me a professor of tourism just because of my experience, because of what I had done. Notice this is the Kim Young-ok painting that I have hanging, and other famous Mongyudo Wondol, famous painting up here, one of my favorites and such. I did this, and then also I did some public speaking for Korea overseas. This is at the United Nations World Tourism Organization Conference on Religious Tourism, and I went here in Cordoba, Spain. I represented Korea at the conference, which is pretty funny. You see, I'm here explaining Korea's religious tourism to the United Nations. And it was kind of funny because people would walk up to me and they'd look at my name tag and see I was representing Korea. And it was 2000, and they'd look at me just kind of funny. And they said, I thought Korea was an Asian country. I thought it was Asian people. Oh, I didn't realize that. It was funny because the Korean government didn't want to send anybody. Munhwa Gongbangbu is not interested in religious tourism at all. They didn't even want to do the temple stay program, and they didn't want to send anybody to this big conference. So I volunteered. I'll go represent Korea. We published this book in 2010, Colors of Korean Buddhism, for the Seoul G20 Summit. And we gave free copies of this book to all like 3,000 people, journalists and aides, and the top world leaders attending the G20 Summit. Then I started, my next project was about the Bekdudegan, and we don't have time here, but you know what the Bekdudegan is, and again, very unknown. I started this in 2004. There was not one word about the Bekdudegan in English anywhere. Never been published, any magazine, not anything on the internet. You could not find this word in English, only in Korean. And I started a project to globalize it, to translate stuff into English and explain artworks like this and explain what is the Bekdudegan, and ended up doing a book about it with the partners from New Zealand. These two guys are very tough guy mountain hikers, but they're not scholars. They don't know anything academic about Korea, but they're great hikers. And so I got them to hike all over the Bekdudegan for me for 9 weeks, taking photos, gathering information. And then these two guys, Roger Shepard, Andrew Douch, wrote this book, Bekdudegan Trail, as a trail guide with me, with David A. Mason. I was editor of the book and contributor from the academic point of view. This is us at, where was that? Waraksan, I think it is. Yeah, we did this. And then the poet Go Un, you might know him, kind of a famous guy, Go Un, and he loves the Bekdudegan and is really into it. So we held this Bekdudegan event for the Korea Forest Service. I ended up being appointed Bekdudegan Hongbo Desa from the Korean Forest Service under President Im Young-bak. Im Young-bak was a great promoter of Korean tourism. I really liked him as a president because he was really interested in tourism infrastructure. Yeah, I became Hongbo Desa. I still am the ambassador of this, and this is me lecturing the Korean Forest Service about the Bekdudegan. They were all sitting there saying, what? A foreigner? How does he know this? And so I'm lecturing here about Dosam Guksa, Korean Pumsujiri. This is another thing you should study, another thing, be able to explain to your tour clients about the Pumsujiri aspects of Korea, including in Seoul City, etc. Lecturing is out. And then this was my next book. After the Bekdudegan, I did an encyclopedia of Korean Buddhism in English. This is the stuff basically we developed for the Temple Stay program, how to explain Korean Buddhism in English. And then we wrote it out much more formal and elaborate, Sanshin entry. If you are really interested in Korean Buddhism and you want to know about Korean Buddhism in English, this book is still available, still on sale, only about Sammanon, I think, from major bookstores like at Jogesa and such. And there's 650 pages about Korean Buddhism in English. This took me 2 years to write this, and had a Korean Buddhist scholar as my partner. And then Fatima, Portugal, once again, Korea's spiritual mountain tourism for the United Nations. Once again, United Nations tourism, representing Korea, wearing a mustache at this time, answering international journalist questions. And once again, Korea's religious history and such like this, trying to promote the nation, doing what I could, doing the best. Here in Czech Republic, I've been invited to Europe like 5 different times to lecture about Korea. We're talking here about Baekdusan, Bekdudegan, and spiritual nationalist significance like Dangun to students in the Czech Republic. This was very cool and such. And then this book came later. Remember at the very beginning, I said, this is how I got interested in Chechiwan. And then finally, I wrote this book in 2016, published. Took me like 5 years to write it. The first book in English about Chechiwan. And again, see, that's really strange. It's one of those strange things. Why not? He's so famous. He's so important in Korean history. There's so many aspects about him. There is 1,000 books about him in Korean language. Really, seriously, 1,000 books. But there was never a book in English. The government didn't do it. The universities didn't do it. They didn't do it for the global audience, for international, for people to know. So I wrote the first book in English about him. The Kyungju Che family helped me, supported me to do this. They were very proud. So check out this book. You can get this book in an ebook form, PDF form from my website. Check that out. Korea's 4 Golden Ages. We don't have time, but I'll be lecturing next Tuesday night on this theory that I have, the 4 Golden Ages of Korea. And the 4th Golden Age started in 1988 I remember I was here and it was a big change. And this is my website. And we'll get to final questions now. I don't care how long we go. We can go over time. That's all right. If you have any more questions, please write this down. My website. Have a look at it. It's more than 1,000 pages in English about everything I've been talking about here and my books and my research results all over, including North Korea. I have a big section on North Korea and relations, and also about Chinese mountains and how they are related to Korean mountains. But check this out, sanshin.org, please. And that's it.
Okay.
We can go to questions.
Okay, so 자 그러면 이제 비디오 카메라 다 켜주시고요. Please open and show your face.
Yes, let me see you.
그리고 the 마이크도 이제 켜주시고요. So turn on the mic.
We have questions here.
네.
Evil spirits.
자 지금 사실 이제 36년 동안 한국에 계신 얘기를 2시간 안에 하려니까 할 얘기가 너무 많은데. I think the Professor David had a lot of story to talk, but we only have 2 hours.
Too many
it's-
stories.
There are too many stories for 36 years stay. Okay, I think it's you know more than us because you stay and witness how the Korea changed from nothing to something. Okay. 자 그러면 아마 이제 질문하실 것들이 많이 있으실 텐데요. 질문들 하실 분들 여기 마이크 켜고 이제 해주시면 되고요. 자 질문 누가 하실까요? 자, 그 템플스테이는 사실 저희가 한국에서 하기 전에 태국에서도 있었고 템플스테이는 사실 저 이전부터 있었습니다. 그
Somebody
태국
asked
같은
here,
경우에는 아주 더 활발하게 진행이 됐었던 건데요. 지금 이제 한국에서는 굉장히 성공적인 아웃컷을 가져. 자, 일단 질문하실 분들 질문 누가 하실까요?
I just want to thank you first. I joined a little bit late, but I really enjoyed about 30 minutes your presentation, and thank you for your information about your homepage is sanshin.org, and I'll check it out later. And could you tell me about temple stay in English? I want to participate temple stay in English soon.
oh, you should. Yeah, it'd be a good experience for all of you. Do a temple stay in English at any one of the great temples. They're all over Korea. And the temple stay programs are a little bit different according to the particular history and characteristic of the temple. We tried to make them with some variety. Martial arts, or else philosophy, or else Zen meditation, something. And you just go to that templestay.org website and you can reserve it. Somebody asked the question here, Japan has same temple stay program, China too. No, they don't. Korea is the only one country that has us at least as a unified temple stay system that covers all of the national tourism. Like in Japan, foreigners can visit Koyasan for the Shingon Buddhist sect, and they can stay at the temple. You can stay overnight, but there's not a program usually in English, or very rarely, or in French or German or Chinese or any other foreign languages. They don't regularly hold that, but you can stay at the temple, eat the food, drink tea, sleep. But only Korea has a temple stay program with very, very rich about Korean history and culture, and it's unified the whole nation between the 3 main Buddhist orders. You know about this. There's the Jogejong, the Taegojong, and the Chuntaejong. And we started temple stay with only with Jogejong, but later Taegyeong and Cheontaejong, they joined with their greatest temples. So it's a unified national thing, really the unity of Korean Buddhism. The other countries don't have that. No, in Thailand, it's just individual temples. Some temples have an international program you can go stay, but it's just that temple. Okay. So for Korea, this is unique.
네, 어느 분이 또 질문하실까요? 어디서 소리가 좀 들리는데 소리 들리는 그 마이크는 조금만 꺼주실래요? 말씀하실 때만 해주시고요. 네. 자, 일단 지금 저희가 약속된 시간은 지나서 먼저 혹시라도 나가실 분 있으면 나가셔도 되고요. 저희가 다음 주 화요일에는 또 다른 프로그램으로 진행을 합니다. 그래서 8시에 진행되니까 시간 혹시 착각하지 마시고 8시에 와주시면 되고요. 지금 질문하실 분들은 적극적으로 질문해 주시면 됩니다. 아까 여기 송정환 쌤은 질문 다 혹시 하셨나요? 지금 더 하실 거 있으면 하시고요.
또 하나 해도 괜찮을까요?
네네네.
First of all, thank you for your lecture. Your lecture was not just a lecture, and it was like a tour. So that you showed me many sites and many pictures, so that it was very helpful for me to understand. So thanks for your lecture and tours. And I got a question regarding with the religion about the Buddhist and Buddhism, because I have my foreign friends, but they never talk about Buddhism and about the Koreans' religious part, because it's not much famous around the world, because Korea has its own culture regarding with the religious, but foreigner doesn't know about it, and they even not talk about the Buddhism about the Korea. It seems like independence with Korea and Buddhism, they thought about like that. So is it normal that the foreigner has a question or curious about the Korea's Buddhism? And if I had a chance to explain about the Korea's Buddhism, what should I have to talk about the first thing that is distinguished from the other culture?
Okay. Not all foreigners are interested in Buddhism, but some of them are. Some are very interested. Both the residents here, like English teachers and ambassadors, some of them are businessmen, some of them are very interested in Buddhism, and some of the tourists who come in here, they are. Korean Buddhism is not very well known in the world, but it's much better known than it used to be due to Songsan Sanim, who popularized Buddhism, Korean Buddhism in the West in the 1990s, very strongly, built like 100 Korean Buddhist teaching centers all over the world. It was an amazing thing. Before him, Korean Buddhism was virtually unknown. I think very famous in the world, there is Zen Buddhism, and there's also the Tibetan Buddhism of the Dalai Lama is very high profile, very fashionable. I think Korean Buddhism is very different from Tibetan Buddhism, very different. You point that out, it's really a completely different kind of Buddhism. Korean Buddhism came from Chinese Buddhism, and it's the Northeast Asian Mahayana style, but it's maybe the strongest in the world of that remaining now. You can tell people, if they're interested in Buddhism, tell them what is unique about Korean Buddhism. Number one, that it's really authentic from the ancient Chinese style, from like the Tang Dynasty, the Song Dynasty, China. Korea still remains that kind of living Buddhism, very authentic, but in China, it's been wiped out. The government, the Chinese government destroyed it, and it no longer exists in gigantic China. And in Taiwan and Hong Kong, it got very modernized and westernized. It's not so authentic, but Korea, old-fashioned, authentic Northeast Asian Buddhism. And Japan is not very authentic either. It's got twisted a lot to Japanese style culture. They changed it a lot, and it became just a very Japanese thing. It's quite different from the original. Korea really is the original. And I really advocate for the government, they should promote this for Chinese tourists, because Chinese tourists would be very interested. It comes from Chinese culture, and stuff they had 1,000 years ago, and now they don't have it anymore. I have a lot of students in my classes, my tourism classes. I have Chinese students from mainland China, and then I like give them assignment. I make them go do a temple stay at one of the great national parks, and they love it. They're really turned on. They say, oh my God, this is our culture, and it's still alive very authentically right here with Korean characteristics. And they recognize the Chinese Taoism. Look at my background painting. You know, this is the Ilwal Oakdo painting from the palace. This is Confucianism. This is very Taoist. The trees, the mountains, the waterfalls, the ocean, the sun and moon. This is very Taoist sort of a thing. So show that. Also, the unique factor that all the greatest temples in Korea are in the mountains, in the deep mountains, because of oppression, because Buddhism was illegal for 500 years in the Korean cities. They tore down all the Buddhist temples. Now, Japan never did that. China never did that. Thailand never did it. None of the Buddhist countries ever did. In there, the greatest Buddhist temples and greatest treasures are in the big cities, in the capital city of the country. But Korea is the country where the greatest Buddhist temples are in the deepest mountains, far, far away, in the national parks. In fact, the greatest Buddhist temples are national parks, provincial parks, the most beautiful places in Korea. So the combination is unique to Korea. And you should really sell this to people, even just taking people to, say, Samgaksan, north of Seoul, Samgaksan, the great temples there in really beautiful mountains, not in downtown Seoul. Downtown Seoul just has Jogesa, and that's it, pretty much. And Jogesa is barely more than 100 years old, 111 years old. So, other things you can see in my book, the Encyclopedia Korean Buddhism, and also on my website, we list the most unique characteristics of Korean Buddhism, like the stone pagoda tradition. We have better stone pagodas than China, Japan, some of the best stuff, and absolutely unique examples like Tabotap or the Four Lions Pagoda at Jirisan Hwaumsa that are perfectly unique, and even the 3-story pagodas of Shilla, quite unique. There's nothing like that in the other countries. Somebody mentioned over here a question. Chinese culture is even number culture, but Korean culture is odd number culture. Correct. Very good. Very good. Korea loves the odd numbers. Point this out to me. It shows that Korean culture is very similar to Chinese culture and somewhat similar to Japanese culture, but different. It's really got its own uniqueness. And one of the ways is like that. The Chinese pagodas are 4 stories, 6 stories, 8 stories, 10 stories tall, even 12 stories tall, all over China. They have that in Korea, 3, 5, 7, 9. Koreans love the odd numbers, the Oak, the 5 mountains here that you see. Koreans emphasize the odd numbers, especially number 3, all throughout, and therefore have more emphasis on the Chunjiyin Trinity. The Chinese, who invented both, the Chinese go with the yang, the duality, like sun and moon, the yang, and make more even numbered things out of that. But Korea is wonderful with its odd numbers and the combinations that get made there. There's even a 13-story pagoda. A 13-story pagoda, only one unique one, that's in Gyeongju, up in North Gyeongju. A real treasure. Anyway, there's a few exceptions. You know, the one at Jogesa is a 10-story pagoda because made in modern times. It's exceptional. But anyway, what else we got?
오케이. 자, 누가 또 질문하실 분 있으실까요?
Okay.
Okay, let me have one question for you. Okay, so actually, in nowadays in Korea, there are so many Christians. So Christian culture and between the not only the shamanism, there is a conflict among the religious area.
Yeah.
So like there is a conflict, the Muslims and the conflict with Buddhism and the conflict with the shamanism. So
Yep.
as a Christian, how affect the Christians affect to the Korean religion? I mean the shamanism and other
Well,
religions.
it is. Okay, one unique thing you can say about Korea to your tour groups, another good unique point, it's the second most Christian country in all of Asia. And as far as Protestant Christianity, what you call Kidokyo, Protestant Christianity, Korea is #1 in all of Asia, the entire Asian continent of 100 nations. The only more Christian country is the Philippines, where I now am, and where they are majority Catholic, although strong Protestant Christianity these days. But Korea is #1 Protestant nation of all of Asia. So it's very strong. And, you know, Korean Christianity is very strong, very socially influential. It is very unfortunate that Korean Christianity is very intolerant of the other spiritual traditions. They're not tolerant. They don't like it. They try to suppress, just like Songnihak under Jung Do-jun. You know, Jung Do-jun, founding the Joseon dynasty. He hated Buddhism and he hated shamanism and he put it down. It's because of him, really, that and King Taejong, that the Buddhist temples were torn down in all the cities and kicked out, and they had to move to the mountains. Similar with that, Korean Christians have been a big problem about this, frankly. During the Japanese colonial occupation, they brought Buddhism back because the Japanese are not against Buddhism. Japanese love Buddhism. They thought the Koreans were crazy for 500 years, making Buddhism illegal. They thought that was nutty. And as soon as that's when Korean Buddhism came back, 1907 or so, as the Japanese took over, Korean Buddhism revived. And Master, you know, Manhei and Kyungjun, forgetting the names. Anyway, so after that, though, after the World War II and the Korean War, we had Lee Suk-man, who was a Christian president, who really didn't like Buddhism, and it was kind of put down in second place again. And other Christian presidents like Kim Young-sam have contributed to that, to actually kind of oppressing shamanism. You know, shamanism is mostly illegal in Korea. It's still illegal. Technically, shamans are practicing everywhere, and you have famous shamans like Kim Kung-hwa, but technically it's illegal in most of the country. There's only a few places I've seen in Korea, local governments have now legalized shamanism. This is mainly due to the influence of Christians. And they don't like to include Buddhism or shamanism in Korean tourism. They don't mind Neo-Confucianism. Neo-Confucianism is okay with Christians. They get along all right. That's why all the money, all the Korean money has Neo-Confucian figures on it. Shimsaendang and Yilguk and Taege and Sejong, Isunshin, because the Christians don't mind. They put the tabo top on the 10 won coin, and Korean Christians, they hate that and they still object to that. They want it taken off. Basically, I would say for 20 years, I fought my whole career about this. I've been fighting about this. When I joined the Munhwa Gwangwangbu, I wanted to include, of course, Sanshin, and other Korean shamanism and things like Ilwul Oakdo, Hanguk Sumdo, and also more Korean Buddhism like Temple Stay, and there are Korean Christians, Protestant Christians in the government. Many government officials are Korean Christians, and they're from Yonsei University or something similar, from Christian families, and they don't want these things. And I used to fight with them. I had arguments with them over lunch. Many times I'd be talking about, Sanshin paintings are beautiful. Sanshin is very interesting. Dangun is very interesting. We can tell the foreigners about this. And they would say, no, it's old superstition. It's devil worship. They're worshiping devils. Dangun and Sanshin, these are devils. And we can never permit that in Korea. We can't show that to foreigners. There were some times when, like, I led a tour out to Taebaeksan, for Gaechunjul, for Dangun Sunjung, and shamanism worship, and they shut me down. Christian government officials intervened to shut it down, saying, no, you cannot take foreigners there. You can't show them that. Also at Jirisan or Gyeongsan, not allowed to show the foreigners because it's old superstition, and people will think Korea is an uneducated, primitive country if you show those things, those shameful things. And I disagree with that. I totally disagree. And the Christians in the Korean government, Munhwa Gwanggangbu, they're kind of my enemy, I have to say. We really disagree about that. Also, my Bekdudegan promotion, the Christians don't like that. They don't want to talk about Bekdudegan and Pungsujiri. So yes, this is a problem.
Okay. So let me share the short story. The last time when we have a big convention meetings, international meetings. So in the international meetings, we used to have some special culture event. When we organize this kind of events, the organizer, the event company planning to have a good, like a kosakut, like a opening. Before opening the big event, we used to have a kosakut. So they trying to make some table before the big meetings start. And then there are many Christians members of the organization. They are really big against the cultural event. And so
that's right.
That was things happen in the tourism too, and also the cultural fund of the 문화관광부 that actually is not allowed to give the money to the shamanism and the other religions. Only for Buddhism. And the Buddhism now they make a sense, make a reason when they started it was a World Cup. So before the World Cup, it has a reason. But that's why the Christians not accepted. There is no way. But without that World Cup, maybe the temple state would be not flourished like today. But there is other religion like Catholics or shamanism. Actually, most of the intangible cultural properties, they are mostly shamanist or related to the local religion or local belief. So that is the kind of irony that we are facing, that the big group of the Christianity group of power that really affect to the cultural field or the tourism field.
That's right. It's really a strong effect, and I've been fighting about this for 20 years. This was an issue in the Seoul 1988 Olympics and in the World Cup 2002 and in the Pyeongchang Winter Olympics. You might, some of you, if you're older, or you could see, you younger folks, you can see the video of the closing ceremony of the Seoul Olympics in Jamsil. They had shamanism. They had Kim Kum-hwa, the great shaman, presenting kind of a farewell funeral gut dance during the closing ceremonies. And that was really shocking. That was maybe the first time that Korean shamanism was ever shown on television to a big audience, to a global audience, in an accepting way, in a positive way. To have that during Olympic closing ceremony, that was a big deal. And we were all shocked, and me and my friends were all celebrating. During the World Cup, I was thinking about the temple stay program, and I advocated for, a little more folklore and shamanism and Sanchin paintings, but no. And in especially the Pyeongchang Winter Olympics, which I was involved with planning, it's part of the Bekdudegan, right there, Pyeongchang-gun, the border with Gangneung City and Pyeongchang-gun, that's the Bekdudegan line. And so I really wanted to use that in the opening ceremony and in the promotion and the tourism, use the idea of the Bekdudegan, try to make it more as Korea as a great mountain hiking country, and the Bekdudegan Trail, Chilbek Samchibo kilometer hiking trail, and like this, and they wouldn't do it. They wouldn't do it. The people in charge, they would not include Bekdudegan and Pumsuchiri ideas and things like that. They did include the Odaesan Woljongsa temple stay, and Woljongsa is the #1 Buddhist temple to visit for Pyeongchang Winter Olympics. They permitted that, but nothing much else. So that's very frustrating. The fight goes on, but you as tour guide, I recommend you include these folklore and shamanism and Korean Taoism and these other elements. Include that, point that out to people.
네, 자, 우리 남나리님 지금 질문 있으셨죠? 질문
네.
하시겠어요?
Why I'm preparing for the test for tourism? So I have no idea about the Buddhist before, but while I'm studying about the test, I realized that our culture is rooted deeply in the Buddhism. Before I started that one, I just thought the Buddhism is just one of our religions. But I found that the Buddhist can be the representative culture. But I studied. I at first I couldn't understand how can the Buddhist can be the representative Buddhism, representative culture. But later I found that the Buddhism is, I said you told us, is the Buddhism is blended with the shamanism and our ordinary people's the life, right? That's why so I realized that the Buddhism can be the one of our culture, but still, so as you just mentioned, so especially when we talk about the tourism, the lots of relics and lots of things are related to Buddhism, right? So still
Yes.
confused about our
if
culture and the Buddhist. Yes.
If you'll understand the whole structure of Korean history and watch my thing 1 week from now, the Buddhism dominated for 1,000 years. The first 1,000 years of Korean history, the most ancient things of prehistory, that's shamanism, and shamanism is still very strong, but Buddhism dominated for 1,000 years, 400 to 1400, basically. And then Neo-Confucianism came in and overtook it and made Buddhism into second place, but Buddhism survived and still a major cultural factor, and of course revived in the 20th century very dramatically. An interesting statistic, all of you should remember this, out of all Korea's treasures and national treasures, 70% are Buddhist. You know, Gukbo and Bo, all the officially designated treasures, 70% are Buddhist. And I would say it's about the same for the most interesting places to visit, the best places to visit in Korea. 70% are 75% of those are Buddhist places. Only 25% are Confucianism, royal palaces, shaman shrines, or other. But most of the greatest stuff that foreigners want to see in Korea is Buddhist stuff. Well, up to like 3/4. So yeah, and you should get my encyclopedia, Korean Buddhism, and learn the English terminology to make sense of this. Like a Sachan Wang Moon. What is that in English? What does it mean? Why is it there in the temple? See my book to understand the simple way to explain that.
It was too hard to memorize the many kind of Buddhists. It's too hard. The Buddha. It was too hard for me to study Buddhism. Still.
Yeah, well, I learned this stuff just because I'm interested in it. I learned it myself as a hobby, and later it became my job.
I think
I
that
did it
before I
as
start
a
my
hobby.
job,
That's part of the thing, is just enthusiasm. And I hope for all of you, you find what you're really enthusiastic about Korea about, whatever that is. Because for me, it really shows through. I love those temples. I love the mountains. I love Sundo Taoism. I love the Sanchin. And when I'm showing that to foreign audiences, they can tell I love it. And that's contagious. It's like a virus. You transmit your enthusiasm. So you should find yourself whatever, even if it's like Korean Christianity or government or something, K-pop or the KTX, whatever it is, you find what you love about Korea and transmit that to the tourists. Show them your love, whatever it is.
여기 교수님 통해서 참 하나 느낄 수 있는 건 뭐냐면, so what we learn from you, actually, that is the whatever you're interested, you can expertise. I mean, the professionalized in some field. That will be the key for your job and as a tour guide. So 모두 다 관심이 다 공부할 수 없거든요. 그러니까 we cannot study all of the field. Like we say ourselves, we call it tour guide as a walking encyclopedia. But
should be, yeah.
We are not professional in all the different fields. So I want to advise you, choose whatever you really love it, then become a professional culturist or expertise in a certain field. That will be the key for success, I think. 이게 굉장히 중요할 것 같아요. 왜냐하면 어떤 분들은 크리스찬이고 어떤 분은 부디스트고 다 이렇게 다르거든요. 근데 그걸 모두 다 이걸 수용할 수는 없거든요. 그러니까 크리스찬 같은 경우는 한국의 history of Christian is also very interesting. 이거 굉장히 흥미롭거든요. So you can be a Christian specialist. So you can visit all the churches and the history. That will be also a very interesting field. And also you can be specialized in the Catholicism. So Korean Catholicism is also very interesting and unique. So you can specialize in that field. The shamanism also is one of the interesting fields. 그래서 아마 그런 중에 하나 자기의 그 전문 부분을 찾는다면 굉장히 나중에 지금 이 데이빗 교수님 같은 경우는 지금 how much you get paid for a day as a tour guide? I noticed on the website you receive over 600,000 won per day.
Well, sometimes
$100, $500 something per day. 지금 교수님 한 하루에 60만 원을 받으세요.
Yeah, it's a variety. There's a
Okay,
variety.
all right.
No,
But I
what-
noticed that you have 600,000 won on that site.
Yeah,
So 그러면 여러분도 이렇게 해서 60만 원을 받을 수 있는 능력이 돼야 되는 거죠. So I think you study hard, you qualified yourself, then you can get $1,000 per day. Why not? You can do it. So,
sometimes I've gotten $1,000 a day, and sometimes I get $100 a day, and sometimes I do it for free. It all depends on the customers, you know. I mean, when like Hana Bank is hiring me to take billionaires to
Okay.
Gyeongju, yeah, you get very well paid. And you know, when I do ambassadors and foreign government ministers or journalists, whatever, like that. But sometimes I do it for free for student groups, just, you know, the public service education. And some, like for the Seoul International Women's Association, maybe I'll get just only shipment on for
is
doing
that,
tour.
is that all? Only 100,000 won from Shiwa?
Yeah, from Siwa. Or maybe 150 or whatever. Depends on how many ladies go along. But that's just public service and
Okay.
just for enjoyment, because I love tour guiding. I enjoy doing it. I want to do it 3 times a week.
Do we have a
And,
license?
It all depends. Well, I can't. I mean, only Korean citizen can get a tour guide.
No. You can apply.
But I thought
for
that
it.
you can be a Korean citizen.
Well, I'm a permanent resident.
So you can get, you can apply. So actually,
Yeah.
exam
No, you
license
can't.
test is open for everybody. So
Yeah.
no restrictions.
Besides, all the exams are in Korean, and
Okay.
Ah.
Okay.
I have the knowledge, but I can't pass the exam.
I
in
think
Korean.
that is the mysterious. How do you understand, even though you don't understand Korean and even don't understand Chinese letter? So how do you study?
Well, I understand a little bit. I mean, as you saw in all this lecture, I can name, you know, the Ilwul Oakdo, and I can show Kwanseum Bosal, the Tengwa, the paintings or whatever. I know the names of things. I know the vocabulary. That's how I did the Encyclopedia of Korean Buddhism. I learned all those terms, and I learned a lot of the Hanja that goes with, so I can read, you know, the names of Buddhist buildings like Samsungak or Daeunjung. I learned that much Hanja. The difficult thing about Korean for me is the grammar. I'm pretty good at remembering lots of vocabulary of name thing. The grammar of the sentences just confuses my brain, and it does so for most foreigners. There's only a few foreigners, you know, really get fluent and appear on Korean television. And I wish I was one. Some of those people are my friends, going on Korean TV and speaking fluent Korean. I envy them, but I just couldn't do that. My brain won't do that.
One more question. So when you're watching the good, or when you're visiting all the ritual shamanism service, is there any spirit comes to you?
Yeah.
Any
It never has.
spiritual contact?
Okay,
Because you met so many famous shamanists, Manshin. So if they are so excellent, normally the spirit, your ancestor's spirit,
Yes.
or the other spirit, maybe.
I've been to hundreds of those events,
Yeah.
especially Sanshin Gut,
Yeah.
Sanshin ceremony, and such. But I have never seen a spirit.
Any experience or special feeling, trembling, or
Yeah, some excitement, some spiritual excitement, some feeling that, oh, this is a very holy place, especially at Gyeongsan or Jiri-san or Taebaek-san. Yes, Hala-san, Kumgang-san. etc. I love the mountains, and I very easily get a spiritual feeling in the mountains, which I connect to Sanshin, but I have never seen a Sanshin figure talking to me. I've participated many times, and shamans told me I would see it, but I never did. So that's just another thing that my brain does not do.
When you visiting the Gyeongsan and compared to other Jirisan mountains, have you feel the negative energy in Gyeongsan?
The energy?
Yeah.
Well, it's a contradiction, isn't it? Because Gyeongsan is very sharp and very steep,
sharp
a
and
sharp point.
negative. Yeah.
And so that seems very yang,
Is
very
it?
yang in an yang sense. But yet Gyeongsan is said to have a female spirit, a very strong female spirit, a kind of mother, great mother spirit. Koreans say, and I can feel both. I feel the spirit, especially maybe more on the west side of Gyeongsan, the east side of Gyeongsan. The west side feels more yang to me. Places, but it's a contradictory thing. A very, like Soraksan is a very yang mountain, very sharp, but Odaesan is much more rounded and gentle and forested, and that feels more female to me and such. And there's some tradition that the wife of Dangun, the queen of Dangun, became Sanshin at Odaesan. Some people say.
So, which place will you recommend for us to go?
Well, I think I mentioned them all. Of course, there's special places like Ma-isan Tapsa. You know that, and that's just amazing, and everybody loves that. Moaksan Gumsansa, or something like that. Go on the west side, but for the kind of things that most interest me, I've already mentioned the Bekdudegan Mountains, Jirisan, Tebeksan, Sognisan, Soraksan, of course. Soraksan is really just the southern branch of Kumgangsan. It's not different. Those two parks should be united, etc. These are my favorite places in the Gyeongsan with that. And right in Seoul, Inwangsan and Samgaksan, very interesting, very beautiful stuff going on there and fascinating. People don't know.
I think you took a lot of photos, mostly murals. Those pictures are disappear, I think, many of them. Because they change the paintings when the colors fade out. So they make a new one. So I think a lot of the photos you took might be disappear and then replace the new paintings.
Yes, I've recorded some cases like that of the new painting made after tracing the old painting. In my book about Spirit of the Mountains, there's a good example of that, exactly from Moaksan near Jeonju. I think also, like in tourism, when you take people to Jeonju is very interesting for the Confucian culture. And then you should also go to Moaksan Gumsansa, and that makes the Buddhist culture. And they're very interesting to put them together as a combination, you see. Or else go to Ma-isan, which is spectacular. I love to do tours like that combine really good Confucianism, really good Buddhism, and some shamanism together in one tour. One of the best places to do that, I will advise you, one of my favorites is Pungi-myeon. Gyeongsan-bukdo, Yeongju-si, Pungi-myeon. That has the Sosu Soan, one of the very best Soan to visit of Confucian culture, and now a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And then very close, only 20 minutes away by driving, is Busoksa, one of the top 6 Buddhist temples of all of Korea. One of the top 6, Busoksa. And they're right there together in Pungi-myeon. And Pungi also has Insam, and it also has a little shamanism at these sites. So that's a great place, but very little known. Even most Korean people haven't been to Pungi, but it's one of my favorites to bring the foreigners to show them the really deep Korean culture.
Thank you for the good marketing point. And I am very interested and agree with you that the authenticity of Buddhism, authenticity in Buddhism could appeal to Chinese people or Chinese travelers.
Yes.
My question is, could you elaborate some more marketing point for Westerners for the Americans or Europeans? Can you tell some other marketing points?
Well, Buddhism is very colorful. You know this. It's more colorful than Confucianism, and so makes better photos. People like the Buddhism. Westerners. It's exotic and different. Confucianism can be a little boring. If you visit a Confucian Sawan, you got to tell a lot of stories, a lot of storytelling and pointing out particular features of it, or otherwise it can just be a pretty boring bunch of buildings, huh? And something like Piram Sawan or one of those, even Dosan Sawan. Buddhism is more colorful. Shamanism is very colorful, and you should show shamanism to Western tourists and point out shamanic aspects like Sanshin Shrine in a Buddhist temple, or the Taoist aspects like Ilwul Owakdo behind me here. That's one of the most colorful parts of a palace, Confucian palace, and tell them about what it means.
You look like a king.
Yeah, right. See,
so you are sitting on the throne.
I'm appearing as a Joseon monarch in front of the 5 mountains. Hey, you know that, I'll tell you something, a secret. Yeah, you know the secret of this painting, what you can explain to people if you're bringing them to Gyeongbokgung or Chandokgung. The secret of this painting, look, it contains the sun and the moon, which are the greatest lights of heaven, right? Greatest lights of heaven. It contains the 5 mountains, north, south, east, west, center mountain, the greatest manifestations of earth. It contains the waterfalls in here between, and the ocean here, the water, which is a big part of the earth. And then it contains the red pine trees, which to Koreans, the red pine trees are the king of all plants, the king of the plant world. So you might say the king of the earth, the 5 mountains, the king and queen of heaven, sun and moon, the king of all the plants in the world, and the king of the ocean, like Yongwang, dragon king, ocean king. Okay, there's only one thing missing. There's one thing in this painting that is missing. It's not here. Animals. There's no animals.
Animals underwater.
Yeah, no, but there's no animals in the painting.
Yeah.
So what is the very best animal in the world? The human beings. It's us. And who is the #1 human being? The king. So when the king of Korea would walk in the hall and sit down in front of the painting, he makes it complete.
It's the universe.
It's the complete world, heaven, earth, water, plants, animals. It is complete. The entire world living in harmony. Plants and animals, heaven and earth in harmony together. That's the secret of this painting. That's why Korea has this painting with no animals in it behind the king. When the king sits there, he makes the complete world. Complete spiritual world. Okay. It's on the 10. Always show this to tourists. It's on the 10,000 won bill right next to King Sejong. this, they never noticed that. They never noticed it before. This
Yeah.
painting is right there, 10,000 won bill. I always take a 10,000 won bill out of my wallet and show it to them right there at Kimbokung at the at the Plaza. Say it's right there. And what I explained to you, that's really the meaning of this painting, deeply philosophical meaning. And so I explain that to them. It's my own idea, but it's a true idea. It's fact.
Very interesting explanation of 1월 오봉도, this picture, I mean painting, because I teach this to elementary school students nowadays, but I never thought about that kind of explanation, the animal thing.
Yeah. The king of heaven, the king of earth, the king of the plants, king of the animals, king of the
Right.
ocean, all together. Okay, maybe we should
Okay.
stop.
All right.
This is
Okay.
very interesting. I love doing it. I enjoy it, but
All right. Okay,
getting late.
let's call it a day. Okay, it's been a long hour, and really I appreciate to come here and having sharing your story. And so thank you once again, Professor. Okay.
yeah,
When you come back to Korea, maybe we can have organize some meeting. Okay, and please share your link for the future. I mean the next lecture.
yeah, I will.
Then
In
I will
fact,
share with others. Okay.
now,
자 그러면 우리 여기 이렇게 시간 내주셔서 우리 교수님 감사 인사드리고요. 이제 마이크 열어놓으시고 인사를 좀 해주셨으면 좋겠고. 저희도 여기서 이제 마무리할게요. 늦은 시간까지 이렇게 시간 해주셔서 감사드리고요. Okay, thank you very much once again. It was a really
Thank you.
meaningful and sharing
Bye,
your thoughts.
everybody.
Okay? Thank you.
Take care.
okay.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
자, 저희는 다음 주에 뵙겠습니다.